The name of the comprehensive plan, as you can see in the logo, is Pittsburgh 2050. We're thinking over the next 25 years, what do we envision Pittsburgh being? How can we prepare to make sure we're a thriving city? And how do we do it from a citywide approach? When we say comprehensive, we mean comprehensive in terms of we're going to touch all the topics the city deals with. We have about 19 to 20 of them. Everything you can imagine: housing, mobility, development, parks and open space, climate action, pretty much everything you can think of. We're thinking about that. So tonight, we want to start with the why. Like, why is it important to do this work? Second, just generally how planning works and how we've kind of already been doing planning, but we're just going to do it at the citywide scale. A little bit more about what the comp plan is. We're going to focus on the just transition, which is a framework for how we're approaching. We are going to highlight a connection to Oakland, just so we understand like how Oakland fits in, and then a little bit about the process and timeline so we can get. Okay, so first with why the need for a comprehensive plan. As you can see, one of these elements we had today, extreme weather. So I think that's on top of mind, right? So if you want to know why, that's one of the whys. How can we be prepared for changing climate and extreme weather? Some other, just key topics that are present of mind. We're always thinking about housing, right? That's affordability, but it's also the housing options. Do they accommodate our needs? We know that households are changing in our lifestyles and makeup, so how can we make sure housing fits those? We're always thinking about economics in terms of jobs and income. And then these are just a few other items that we're thinking about in terms of the future. And of course, mobility, we're always thinking about how can we get around in a safe and efficient way. So with that, these are just a few examples that we pulled out. But we did want to kind of open it up. Oftentimes in the city, we're reacting, we're putting out fires, we're doing things on the ground to maintain and keep the cities alive. This is an opportunity to think in the forefront about threats, challenges, but also opportunities over the next 25 years. So we don't need to get too in depth, but if you go on and just call out a few of those, what are the big threats? What are the big challenges that we're we're starting to deal with, but maybe they may become more real 5, 10 years down the line. So feel free to kind of fill it out.
Public transit. Funding for it.
Yeah, that's a big one, yeah.
Do you take things that are not just the city?
Yeah, I think this is the comp plan. We can think pretty expansively. So go for it.
Public schools and human services.
Climate resiliency, waste and waste removal, access to community spaces, clear spaces, and parks as well.
Sure.
What was that? Sorry, I missed that. Affordability. Okay. I think to me, the universities, the museums, and hospitals represent huge opportunities for us, right? In terms of the threats, but these are the opportunities that we're going to build around and embrace and figure out how to maximize the potential that they represent to the community.
For sure. That's a good list.
Green space, stormwater management, tree canopy. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, there's a lot, and this is just to get us thinking. I'll throw out another one, like the impact of remote work and its influence on how people work in office spaces, how people move around. It can change a lot. So it's actually maybe beneficial that we're taking this on kind of in a post-COVID world, because we've learned a few lessons, but And from my understanding, there's still a lot to unpack with some of the implications.
I'd say certainly energy demand is huge. That's going to be a problem.
And from my understanding, some of that has to do with powering data. Right?
Are you guys going to update the 2030 challenge in terms of your buildings and things like that? Is there a new 2030 challenge coming up?
That's definitely going to be a component.
Okay.
So yeah, it's as we get into it, it's really an opportunity to evaluate all the planning we've done and learn from what we've done and then make improvements and tweaks. So yeah, we'll definitely dig into some of the types of planes we're going to be building this off of.
I think another opportunity is, I think we have to switch the mindset a little bit about just neighborhoods. Because what happens is we start to think of boundaries, just like you handed out a map saying, hey, I live here or there. That's not how a community really works, right? That people live across boundaries, work across boundaries, and I think, to me, there's an opportunity to look at something called a walking shed for students for Pitt. Right? And to me, one of the huge goals should be that all students have the opportunity to live and walk to school. That's going to free up housing in other communities, reduce public transportation, reduce cars. But I have never seen anyone put a goal out there that says, hey, University of Pitt, all 40,000 students should have a housing opportunity that they can walk to school. Right? And I'd add to it that Pitt shouldn't have to own the buildings. Because the moment Pitt owns the buildings, it comes off the tax rolls. So we need to have private investment in housing for students so they can walk to school and make a community that they want to live in versus spreading it out. So that's why I think a walking shed, right?
Yeah. That's a cool way to think about it. I definitely hear you. You know, we can get locked into our neighborhoods.
Right.
And sometimes our planning, you know, we've done a neighborhood plan for Oakland, and there's benefits to that. But yeah, we're going to see that the importance and the value of the comprehensive plan is to really break down those barriers and think about the connections.
Think uptown, right? You have Duquesne, uptown, Pitt, CMU, Carlo, and Chatham. You have this whole column there, but uptown is never thought of as a place that we could develop for student housing. It is 5 blocks away.
And it's going to be on the bus rapid transit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So there's no reason and it needs a lot of help. There's a lot of opportunity there, but no one thinks because they're not here at these meetings says this is Oakland, right? And so there's no, but it's within easy walking distance, right? So I think we have to, if we really want a comprehensive plan, we need to think bigger than neighborhood by neighborhood.
Well, that's great to hear. Definitely. I think, yeah, we're just reinforcing the need for why we're thinking about this. But yeah, we'll take one more.
I think public health is going to be a huge issue. There's going to be increased need of public health services as we get unhealthier and unhealthier as a country and less inclined to use vaccines and other public health measures that have been proven successful. So I think public health is going to be huge.
But see, I would challenge the other question, how do we prevent that from happening? Right, so how do we have more green spaces, more exercise areas, more bike trails, more things like that, right? That preventative, right?
It's an opportunity as well.
Right, we say that's an upcoming challenge. What fosters better behavior to prevent that, I guess?
Good point.
Air quality.
Yep.
Most development construction, particularly in some of the neighborhoods that are just like right on top of certain factories and manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, and yeah, you know, from my understanding, air quality, you know, we think of it citywide, but there's some, when you're in really close proximity to certain uses, even highways, you know, it can definitely be some concerns. Yeah, and I think, you know, speak of one last thought on public health, you know, I think public health is really, in the last, you know, few decades, really thinking about social determinants of health. and how like where we live affects our health. It's kind of intuitive, but now, I think when we think about public health, we're thinking about the built environment and how it affects, how is it safe to get around? Is it healthy to walk and bike around? And all those things are connected. So I think that type of thinking is going to be integrated into a comprehensive plan. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. That was like really, I think that gives us a lot to think about, and I appreciate it. You guys are kind of, really digging into some good topics. So I'll just quickly touch on this because Oakland is familiar with planning. I don't bore you on this, but essentially, I just want to revisit. This is kind of the neighborhood planning model that we've used, and it's similar to most planning. But essentially, it all starts and is centered around a vision, which is, community supported or community driven. So we always kind of start with, okay, we want to make sure on the ground, the residents, the community members, what do they desire to see? And then from there, we break it up into goals, which are kind of long-term outcomes, and those are based off a variety of topics. So in the neighborhood planning process, we have 4 topics. In the comp plan process, we're going to have a few more. And then we really get to actionable items, like this is a program, this is a policy, this is a partnership that can actually, get something done and move forward to the goals and ultimately realize the vision. And because they're actionable, the Oakland plan had about 140 actions. There's an amount of accountability because there's certain community partners that have their names. There's an element of commitment there, as well as thinking about the budgetary needs and other elements. So while it's not a one-to-one, we're going to take that kind of structure and we're just going to apply it to the city. That's kind of what we're doing with the comprehensive plan. It will still function in a similar way, but it will be unique in many ways. So hopefully that's our kind of bridge of how we get to. So now I know this slide is going to have a decent amount of words, but if we had to sum up what the comprehensive plan, this is our wonderful definition. I would focus on it's a community-wide vision. It's holistic because it's thinking about and considering all the different topics. It's going to be a guidebook, for how do we grow as a city. And as I mentioned, it's going to have kind of a specific action items for us to reach those that are really going to be baked in reality of the systems we're working in. So it will go from idealized vision and it will filter down to how we actually. This just kind of gives you a little bit of, what we think a good quality comprehensive plan, will be set apart from maybe a typical comp plan. And so I can kind of let you guys digest that. One element that I will pull out here, which is going to be somewhat unique to our plan, is we're going to recognize that in past planning and in past development of the city, there have been harms, there have been certain neighborhoods that have been left out, essentially. So that's one thing we're going to be evaluating, and we're going to try to be intentional about making sure these future strategies and action items do their best to be equitable in terms of how we distribute our resources and our funding, as well as our, attention, essentially, and do our best to. And we'll get more into kind of that element of the plan as we talk about just transition. And then the last kind of big takeaway here is, what are we building this plan on? We're really going to build it on data and community voice. So that's going to drive everything. So, some processes may be really heavy in community voice, and that's great. Others on data. We're going to do our best to make sure we have all the data we can look at to be prepared, but then we're going to really ground it in community voice. So those are kind of And this element really says that, to I think some of our points before, we have done a lot of planning in Pittsburgh. We have not really, in modern times, done a truly comprehensive plan that integrates all topics. We focus on some citywide topics. We've definitely done a lot of neighborhood planning. This, you know, this could really unlock us to be prepared for the future in a way that other plans have not to this extent. Yes.
Yeah, just to like, as an example of how we're using data and community voice. So we're in phase 2 of the process, which we're going to get into the funding, but we've gone through like our existing conditions data, and all of that is accessible to the public, and it's on PGH 2050, and it's free for anyone to go through and give feedback on and see if like, does that data make sense for like your lived experience, or is there like, does something not line up? So it's open and free for anyone to give feedback right now, and it's actually really helpful to get that feedback from existing conditions.
And roughly, what's the data set you're looking at?
So there's the 20 topics are on PGH 2050, if you like click on the learn page.
Which we're right now doing.
Yeah, here we are. And if you want to like review what has been put out there, like it's a lot of information. So whatever you're interested in, essentially, and see if, does that seem right to you, or does it feel like the data isn't expressing what you think should be like a priority?
So apologize, I can't see that from my wrong glasses.
Yeah.
It's too tiny.
You have, like, for example, you have data on how long it takes to get a building permit and how long it takes for that permit to be processed so construction can begin, right? Because there's a lot of different things we could look at that affect how a plan comes to fruition, right? So if you say, hey, I have a plan, we want these sort of buildings over here, but it takes 6 years to get a building built, you're like, okay, something's wrong, that you're not collecting the correct data to see why your comprehensive plan is not working, right? So we got to look at what are sort of back of the house, the information that are keeping your plan from happening, right?
The essential components of implementation. Meaning, in order to be able to implement the plan, we need to be able to have certain kinds of city functions and services working efficiently, among which
Right.
is enforcement, among which is
Right.
permitting, inspections, all of those things have to move, yeah.
Right.
So-
I think-
Yeah,
What are the obstacles to well-integrated city functions so that you don't have to like go knocking on 6 dozen different doors in order to be able to have one project move forward?
yeah, and while that might not be specifically in here, I do know that, I'm thinking about our zoning and building team, they definitely have a lot of data in terms of how they review projects, so yes, that's something we can make a note of and see how we can communicate that.
Or understand it, right? So if I was a builder coming into town, you just set out, hey, we want more labs or whatever in this area. You know, what's their reaction? Like, no, there's 7 piles of red tape. I don't want to invest in this community because it's too hard. It's not going to happen, right?
I don't know if this is like getting too in the weeds, but so like this first phase that we just went through was like existing conditions. So I don't think it gets quite into processes yet, but there is a like government working group that is a part of this process that's going to like inform it, because they're the ones that know, okay, how does public works work with like permits? Like how do those two departments work together? How can we improve it? And I do believe that there's going to be some kind of like mapping exercise done for like,
Right, or is there going to be a liaison in the future? Let's say I'm a developer coming in. Could you have a, I would call it a concierge that says, hey, I'll help you through, because you're not an expert in the government paperwork, we are, but because you're investing X amount of money, I'll be willing to help you through the process. And give you the deadlines, the timetables who you need to talk to, whatever. But I don't think I've ever heard the government present that way.
Yeah,
To say, hey, we want this to occur, because the government's not going to build all the affordable housing, right? The government's not going to do all these different things.
Yeah.
It's going to rely upon the rest of us who want to build, invest, or whatever in the community.
yeah.
But it's a nightmare.
I hear you. No, and those are definitely things our zoning team thinks about and is planning for. I think we may have a kind of a beta version of that type of role you're describing, but I think the comp plan could definitely recommend some type of effort very similar to that. So I think it's definitely something we're aware of and thinking about.
Great.
Okay. Next kind of opportunity to chat a little bit and open it up is, we were already kind of getting at this, but one of the key elements here is how neighborhoods are connected, right? Getting rid of our blinders. So I want us to think about how different neighborhoods are affected. I think the one that we already talked about was housing. We lived through that, right? So like even the staff population, faculty of the institutions, aren't all going to live in Oakland. So we definitely see spillover of those populations into a lot of neighborhood, Shadyside, for example, and it definitely impacts the housing dynamics. One other example of a connection, which I think we've talked a lot about, is how is Oakland connected to Hazelwood Green? And we know that the institutions are building research centers there, even along the Pittsburgh Technology Park. But we know that there's big topography disconnects. Even the street network doesn't align well, and there's challenges. We've heard of past projects like the Model Code Connector to connect those. So, I think the comprehensive plan may have an opportunity to think through that type of neighborhood to neighborhood mobility connection in a more holistic way. So those are just a few examples of how what happens in Oakland affects another neighborhood. And I'd love for you all to share maybe some other examples that kind of represent those connections.
I'll double, triple underscore what Andrea said earlier about public transit. It's really, really important. My wife and I bought a house in Morningside specifically because it was on a public transit line that we could only need to own one car. And seeing these significant cuts being talked about, if no permanent funding is come up with, is really disheartening. At the museums, we have, of our volunteers and interns, over half use public transit to get to work. Over a quarter of our staff get to work through public transit, and it tends to be the folks who maybe earlier in their career have less means to be able to do other forms of transit. So it's incredibly important. And if you want to talk about connective tissue, that's exactly how you do it.
Yeah, great point.
And I don't know if there's a function or a way that we can implement some sort of funding mechanism as part of city tax base in some way. I know we're pretty restricted with second-class city tax base, but some way that we can fund that regionally, because it's not just the city, it's our whole region that really benefits from those things.
And we must apply for the RAD funding.
They do get RAD funding.
Can we get more? Whatever, right? So it's RAD, right? If it's a regional asset, you can propose and change it over to there, right? And I would argue, let's get rid of the fares we have on the buses, and more people would ride the buses, and change the whole system of it, but put another public funding that way, and get the funding that way. Off you go.
Sure.
Yeah, then your funding gap is not 100 million, but 500 million. So you need to find where that's going to come from. I'm 100% with you right there. Like, why not? In fact,
Like if you got to don't use the word funding yet, but we say it's 500 million to fund this service for the community.
in addition to what it's already funding. Like the fare box is only half of what it costs.
But how much does it cost you to process it? I mean, there's a number.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, totally.
So I think if we turn the term around to say this is a an entity that is part of the community and we fund it, great, let's figure that out. I think that it's sort of flipping it on its head, right?
Yes.
Other connections? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is just having like magnets or centers of activity in areas where there aren't activity. An example that I think of all the time is the open portal project that we talked about for a long period of time, and that's sort of trying to put the same community and take in the cool environment that we normalize.
That's
And-
not actually where the portal was, just FYI, when we talk about the portal, we're talking about up by the fixed boards of the.
Yeah, that's what I'm not talking about open process. I'm talking
Gotcha.
about
Okay,
where
sorry,
they're
apologies.
building
Yeah.
Yes,
up in
yes.
the center.
Like, why did that not work? Why weren't they able to build stuff there? And one of the biggest challenges that is there that I think is hard to recognize at first is like the way the roads are configured in that area. There's a dead zone of activity. There's never going to be development that's going to go over 376 and go over the alleys or anything. And that means that you have this bridge that exists between Bluff and the uptown neighborhoods and Shady and what she said, South Side. But there isn't a connection there. So if you're going to invest in that area, it's like you're kind of relying on the activity that exists from like the campuses that exist, and it's not really a great proposition to want to develop there. So I think it's like it's a combination of having development that creates a center that is something that wants people to, oh, I'm walking like over towards South Oakland, and then I'm going to continue going down into Eastern Green. As opposed to just being like, oh, this is going to exist over here and it's just its own thing. It has to be sort of connected, I feel like, to make anything work as a whole. And I don't know, I just think that that's really important, seeing those sort of magnets to pull people places, whether it be an institution or something that's built somewhere.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And that's even somewhat related to the Oakland plan and its work, but to your point, recognizing that it's not just Oakland, it connects to other neighborhoods. So yes.
Yeah, and it's like, I understand that, like, with some things, like, I think in the open plan right now, there's that area where they're looking at part of this land that they have centered as an area that can be like an innovation district or office space. And it's like, I know it's like you want to find an area where it's empty or there isn't a lot of stuff there so you can build something tall and something exists, but it's like, well, is anyone actually going to really want to do that if there isn't anything, because it's on the side of the hill, there's a bus way next to it. It's like hard to try to find these areas where it works as a whole. It can't just be sort of like a shoehorn.
Right. And one thing about the comp plan is we're going to be able to think about land use. So all those things you're considering, we as a community, as a city, are going to be able to have those conversations. And I think it's going to be really exciting. Thinking about what type of uses, if it's going to be research lab, where do they fit best, not just within Oakland, but within the city. Housing density, where does that fit? Unfortunately, in the vacuum of no comprehensive plan, we don't get to have those decisions. We're reactive, and we're saying wherever developer can come and shoehorn a project, they're going to try to get it. So I think we can be more proactive, and that's definitely a piece of it. So definitely stay tuned.
The Bates Street 376, that whole, so we're the fourth largest economic driver in the state. We have barely an entrance off of 376, which is silly beyond belief, right? That the way you turn into it, and then as you're coming up Bates, you're coming up a dumpy road with dumpy houses into our biggest economic engine that pick a number of 40,000 parents come into on alumni weekend, and this is our showcase. I live here. It's a dump coming up there, right? It's how do we figure out how to fix that as an entrance to our city, right? You have the tunnel coming from the airport, which is great. Open, miserable.
It's a really great example of the way in which past planning decisions can bind you like beyond your lifetime, right? Because the reason why Bates is so shitty coming up the side is because the exit was designed to deliver you to the mill that no longer exists on 2nd Avenue. Like nobody actually went up the hill. You always went down the hill to get to the door, and you went straight
They're
on.
going to spend the money to buy it all out and redevelop that whole valley
Well,
into a.
It's a problem though, because then you run into the same issues of like, we want people to go down because of agreements for the neighborhoods. But like, now it's everybody's up here and we want to get down there. If we build a highway there, for example, that's like
I think we need to redesign it. Since I agree.
Yeah, it's like-
How do we embrace all of it? But right now, I live 3 blocks from it. I don't want to drive down there.
No, and I agree with you, it's just, it's like, but then you wouldn't want to walk down there. I mean, I don't want to walk down there now as it exists, but if they made it like, I don't know, 6 lanes, you also don't want, you really don't.
Well, you gotta figure out how to fix that.
Yeah, it's like, I worry about it because PennDOT is the driving force that we do anything like that, and I worry about invoking them into any discussion of regional plan.
We have pinned that on in the I will kill somebody if it doesn't happen list to provide dedicated transit lane and dedicated bike lane up and down the hill when they do wide lane. Like, that's a hill I'm gonna die on, and we've had that conversation, but they're slow 100% in delivering a transparent plan that everybody can.
I mean, right now, that sidewalk that goes down,
It's
you have a
horrible.
pole that goes up and the sidewalk goes around the utility.
So,
poles.
right, and I'm glad you all talked about that because that's a corridor we're all gonna be thinking about. And we're gonna think, how can we accommodate users, right, in a shared way with limited space. Hopefully where the comp plan ties into that is maybe there's a broader discussion and there's more eyes and there's people from all the different neighborhoods thinking together so that maybe we can have a vision and have some momentum behind that. So when PennDOT does do their planning, we've got out ahead of it. And there's some mobility advocates such as Mobilify, who I think is already starting to lay the groundwork for that. So I think that's a good example of that's one corridor, that's one issue, but the comp plan can get us ahead of things. Good examples. Should we? Trying to think of maybe one last cool connection.
The other road that I think is an opportunity is on the backside of the pit, going across the hill, going down the Bulch Hill.
Here.
Yeah, so that whole section there could be a huge embrace of taking Pitt and its community and blending better in the hill. That's all undeveloped or subdeveloped, whatever you want to call it, Heron Ave.
Yeah.
And that community is not embraced in the development of Pitt. It's like their back door. They don't think about it. And it could really help that community out by having more interest and more folks who want to develop over there.
Yeah, good connection. Because we also work in the Hill District on their neighborhood plan. Heron Avenue has been a focus of theirs. So I think this could be a good setting to start talking together and seeing how they work. So because you're right, their planning for Heron is going to have to consider Oakland's influence and vice versa. So
opportunity, right? So let's get these negative words out of our things, right? This is an opportunity to think ahead in 2050. Like, how do we make a celebration of the things that we do already? How do we do things better? How do we, right? I think I would keep us from, I have marketing packets of do all positive to where we want to go, right?
But its expansion in Oakland has had the effect over the last 50 years of displacing permanent residents because the development for residential accommodation for the students has not kept pace with the expansion of its enrollment. So if you're going to talk about expanding the development footprint of Pitt, you want to make sure at the same time that you are accommodating that kind of influence, so you're not going to be displacing people who already live there.
Well, that's a whole longer discussion, but I do think you're going to displace people on whatever plan you come up with. People change and displace, right? That is sort of the story of economic development across the world, right? Displacement occurs. The question is, how do we mitigate or provide new opportunities? So right now we have a lot of aging seniors in Oakland who are sitting in 100-year-old houses who can't afford the upkeep. They have nowhere else they can go. And so they're sitting in houses that are too expensive, very old, and dangerous for them. We have no place that they can live instead of being in those houses and in the community. I've seen houses catch on fire with an 80-year-old couple living in there because they couldn't afford the electrical upgrades. Two blocks down, because we don't have senior housing that can be melded with graduate students. No one's thinking of that. No one's doing it.
Yeah, and I think moving forward we have to, housing is going to be a big part of this plan, and this is our time to be more proactive. makes sense. So yeah, thank you. That was a good second little discussion. We'll have one more kind of open-ended thing at the end, but otherwise we'll kind of keep working through this. Honestly, I feel like you are definitely, at a pretty advanced level in terms of like unpacking these issues. But yeah, I mean, the comp plan is going to have a land use and development component. That is kind of foundational to comprehensive planning. And so, yeah, we're going to be making a lot of decisions about land use, and kind of all these different dynamics that were brought up will definitely be on the table. In addition to land use, we also have an opportunity to think about environmental challenges. Obviously, a city of hillsides, rivers, dealing with stormwater and flooding, and all the various environmental impacts. Being able to be a little bit more proactive and holistic in terms of responding to that. So those are just a few other.
Do you know if you're going to fix the water code so people can process stormwater on their property better? Because I think before that wasn't allowed. There was I can't think of what plumbing rule it was, but that was a no fix when they were trying to figure out how to collect stormwater and process it. They were given a real hard time to try to figure out how to do that. So if you're going to put in some of these mega buildings and projects, you got to add some of these sustainability features that are common around the rest of the world, but our code hasn't caught up to them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There is a stormwater mitigation portion of the code, which is for new construction and for substantial modification to existing structures. Doesn't require retrofitting, doesn't require anything like that, but you do need to have a stormwater containment, hold, and then slow disbursement. But you're talking about gray water use.
There's a different product that I don't know. There's the stormwater mitigation is one, but there's another one that they weren't allowed to manage. It was black water on property.
Okay, I can see that.
Right.
It's kind of a crappy hillside for doing it, yeah.
What?
It's not an easy hillside for them to manage.
It wasn't the hillside, it was the plumbing issue. It was a regulation that the city didn't allow it to happen.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like if we're going to look at green and environmental issues, we want to make sure our code can be up to what the latest technology is going on, that we can handle that. Right? We don't want our code keeping us back from doing some of these things. I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll quickly move on to the just transition. It's essentially a framework for how we're approaching planning. We'll give just kind of give a basic understanding. But essentially, like as things go through change, it's always good to acknowledge that not everyone benefits equally from those changes. In the past development of the city, there has been inequitable distribution of community resources, so that some neighborhoods have been left behind, and there have been, in certain cases, policies that have actually led to that. Don't want to get into all of the details, but there are examples of urban renewal in certain sections of the city that led to kind of the displacement of large parts of communities, and really led to some detrimental impacts. So, and there's other policies such as redlining, which we may be familiar with, which really took away the ability to invest in certain areas based on government policy. So this plan just wants to recognize some of those past harms so that we can plan for a more equitable future. So yeah, these are just some of those elements I was getting at, addressing past harms, also focusing on improving current conditions. So we want to make our neighborhood safer, more stable, and more connected. We also want to, if we think about what we love, we want to celebrate our culture, our green spaces, our neighborhoods, and the people who make Pittsburgh home. And then also, as the city grows, we essentially want to make sure that everyone shares in the benefits, not just the select few. As we get into this slide, I think the best way to think about this concept is we recognize that, in a past industrial economy, for the city, there were environmental impacts, such as pollution and land degradation. And unfortunately, those had been disproportionately effective upon the most vulnerable and also economically disadvantaged groups. And so the thought is like if we're trying to transition to a more sustainable energy, but also a more sustainable economy, we want to embrace that transition, but make sure that those same vulnerable populations are not also left out of the new jobs that come with that and the new opportunities that come with that. So hopefully that's kind of my way of explaining this lens. We think it's very important and foundational to our work as planners. Essentially uniting kind of a sustainability focus with equity is really one way to think about this framework. And so what this leads to is some of our, these are some of our objectives here, kind of our North Stars, right? Is to make sure there are equal opportunities, regardless of, neighborhood and other socioeconomic groups, as well as, being proactive about protecting our neighborhoods from those environmental harms that I mentioned. And so what this leads to is it's kind of a lens. It's a lens of how we get to view all the topics. And so what this means is, we're thinking about, so we're able to think about all of these different topics, such as making sure, for example, on the left here, making sure our infrastructure is resilient. Those are kind of all the topics that will kind of relate to that pillar. When we think about our neighborhoods and making sure they're attainable, for folks to thrive in, we have some other elements there. And then the last three are meaningful economic opportunity, thriving community culture and well-being, and empowered and engaged communities. So when we think about all the topics in the comprehensive plan, this is one way that we're going to help organize them. And I'm going on my notes here. But yeah, feel free to kind of sync this in as you're showing.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there is overlap between these. So like, I was just in a meeting for like attainable neighborhoods of choice, and a lot of it is about like housing and things like that, but there is like also commercial corridors in that section, and because neighborhoods have some struggle in commercial corridors, and also the connectivity issue, I think, is going to be in that kind of pillar. So there is like, these pillars are in conversation with each other. But it's interesting because like in this conversation, we're kind of like getting into specific examples, which is, I feel like the next step of where we are in the process, but it is at a very high level process, like stage in the process right now. So just kind of pinning down our goals and like identifying what the problem areas that we want to focus in on are. So that is why it does seem kind of higher level, because we're only in the initial phase. But it will get down into kind of like more of a future land use detail level.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so more to come with this, but this is just kind of an organizing structure for the plan. Okay. All right. Well, we're definitely moving along pretty good. We wanted to focus a little bit on the connection to Oakland. And so we want to reiterate, and I think you all are probably on board with this, but the comprehensive plan certainly doesn't negate the neighborhood plan. We did the Oakland plan, it was completed back in 2022. And as you can see on this graphic, we've done a number of neighborhood plans. The comprehensive plan will be complementary and supportive of those plans and kind of built upon them. The comprehensive plan will be able to provide more detailed guidance for neighborhoods that don't have plans. so that they can think about, development decisions and even how they can do rezoning if needed. But in this next slide, hopefully I can do my best to explain the different buckets. So the Oakland plan still has its jurisdiction over the neighborhood. So any local topic that was in the plan is still very much, moving forward and applicable. One example would be the community service hub. So that's a model that we've been thinking about, having more third spaces, opportunities for programming, opportunities for different age groups to come together and build community. So that's independent and that's within Oakland. It's more specific. The comprehensive plan will kind of sit over top and really be at higher levels. Where it does connect is when there's a topic that relates to neighborhoods. So that's what essentially those connections we were talking about. Whether it's a mobility corridor that connects Oakland to Hazelwood Green, obviously there's going to be overlap and things that we consider. So hopefully, I know it's a little bit fuzzy, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how these are complementary. And pretty much in this phase, the consultant team has been reviewing all of our existing plans and really building the comp plan upon them. Obviously, there's going to be new content, there's going to be new direction, but we just wanted to kind of make that distinction. Okay. Kind of moving through things, just a little bit on the process and timeline. As we've reiterated, this is going to be extremely public process in terms of there are going to be number of engagement opportunities, both within our neighborhoods and citywide. And so this graphic really kind of shows you the phases that we go through. So yeah, it's all the way until the end of 2026, so it's about a 2-year plan. Right now, we are in phase 2. See here, synthesis, and pretty much we've been able to do a lot of our existing conditions gathering as well as analysis, and we're starting to, as you look at those pillars, we're starting to look at connections between all the data points we're collecting and all the different topics. And throughout the summer, the real key is going to be developing the shared vision. So way back in the first slide when I talked about we always guide plans based on community vision, that's really where we're going to start. So it's going to be listening, hearing from the community, and hearing really what you all value, what you care about, what you might be worried about, what you're excited about. And we're going to kind of collect that so we make sure we kind of have a North Star. After we have that North Star, the shared community vision and our values, then we'll move into phase 4 scenario planning as we get into the fall and winter. We can talk more about what that will be, but essentially, I think it's a really cool concept. We're not just going to say, this is the future Pittsburgh. We're going to provide an array of options. Of say, like, if we do this path, this is what's required, this is what we have to be prepared for, these are the trade-offs. And then we're going to be able to kind of evaluate a few different paths and then make an educated decision on one or a combination. So that's kind of the real, I guess, nuts and bolts of the plan. And then we put together the report and the document itself to make sure that it can communicate the vision well as well as all the implementation items of like this policy, this project, this investment. So we will get very specific. And I think if we didn't mention this, the cool thing about the comprehensive plan is really going to be a guide for all city planning decisions, all really budget and investment decisions. So instead of like the way we do it now, which is still valuable, we can each year we think of where do we need to allocate money, but this will give us kind of some more foresight and be proactive about. We're more committed and we have a more shared vision of like, these are the things that we have a long-term commitment to. So I think we're really excited with that. And then the final hope, hopefully a good promise, is that once we have that, we hope we'll have better coordination among our departments. Which I know we always hear about that as a struggle because, you know, we're all doing good work. We're all kind of in our places, domains, the street network, DPWs and parks and other spaces. How are we making sure all those are coordinated? We believe that the end document from this comp plan will give us a clear, unified guidebook, essentially. So I kind of went through the phases, but Shoshana, do you want to talk through all the different kind of engagement items that are going on through here?
Sure. So right now they're working on like a 90 to 1 campaign. So you can access all of this on the PGH 2050 site that I mentioned. But they're essentially trying to get examples of like people from all 90 neighborhoods and hear kind of what they think are like the opportunities and challenges in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and so this is kind of a temperature check. It's really to get some initial thoughts out here. We know it's kind of high level, but it's definitely a good place to start in terms of understanding getting the personality of folks out so that we can really ground the plan in that. And to the point on the digital hub, there's going to be, as you see this bar here, the hub is going to have a lot more surveys and questions. So we're going to be continuing to get input on specific topics. So that's just one way to start.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like right now we're explaining like the plan for the plan. Like it's hard to be like, this is the plan, like the plan's not written yet. Like, but this is the process that we're trying to get people on board with and get people involved with. In order to make the actual plan like more substantial, the more people that have voices in it, the better it will be. So.
Yeah, and at the bottom here, these are just all the different types of stakeholders that are providing input to ground it. And we could get into the details of this, but it's essentially, different segments of the population that are really helping informing this. But it's even if you're not participating in one of these directly, there's certainly going to be chances to provide input. And me as your Oakland City planner, neighborhood planner, will definitely make sure you're aware of all these opportunities. One thing to really help clarify, so I'm trying to get the sign up sheet. There it is. Okay, so everything is on the digital hub. It's PGH 2050. So if you're ever curious about where we are in the process, everything's going to live here. There's a QR code, but it's really easy to remember too. You can sign up for email updates, so that's important. So if there's a event, you'll make sure you stay kept in the loop. Okay, I think we covered pretty much everything we needed to. I'll quickly just pull this up just to show how, like, you know, this is kind of how you move around the site. You know, this is going to have a lot of that background information we have. We can also look at the timeline just to see, like, hey, where are we, as well as upcoming events. So, hopefully we're not leaving you in the dark to stay connected. I think if there's not any specific questions about the mechanics, and I know there's a lot that's going to come, we can then definitely, maybe in closing, I'm not sure how we're doing on time.
I don't. I live here. I don't need to be anywhere.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just leave one moment if there's any logistic questions.
Are we promoting the recruitment of people for the 911?
That's a great question. So
How indeed.
How indeed. Oh,
Yeah, I think that we are trying to do a bigger push. We are having our summer engagement this summer. So we decided on the community working group has been selected. They'll also be, they were chosen because of their networks and they're like already embedded in community, and so we're going to be utilizing that group to get the word out about different things. And then our summer engagement is like a mini grant program for different community groups to apply for, and I believe that the mini grant.
Yeah, I think it's internally, but it hasn't been
Yeah,
shipped.
actually, but it's like 20 events over the summer that they're gonna have, and so hopefully get the word out.
I would be curious how students can get involved. Obviously, it's difficult, anything students do, because the summer of engagement students are famously gone over the summer, but I'd be curious like how students can get involved, and just like what avenues would exist to get voices out, not just at Pitt, but at all the campuses.
That's a great question. Well, I'll kind of give it this, you probably don't like, but there's a lot of studying that you could do. So these are all these baseline kind of data reports that we mentioned. So if you feel like really digging in, you could go through and review them and maybe make some observations of like, was I surprised by this data point? Do I want to learn more? That's something I didn't see here. Maybe you could provide a critique of if we present this better. So there's a little bit of studying that you could probably help us with, in addition to other opportunities.
Yeah, cool. I will definitely check this out, because that is like an urban planning club gold mine for everything. But I was wondering like something like a space like this, like a town hall style, like for students, maybe like if that's something you guys would be interested in doing.
Yeah, and so we have the youth working group, which, and I'll have to like think about the details of the makeup, because I hope there's some university representation. We're working on finalizing that. But honestly, like this summer engagement is for us to tailor it to the needs of each youth. So I think there's definitely opportunity for us to create what we want. So let's make a note of it, and let's try to.
Yeah, but why not make it a course at Pitt? A fall course, a spring course, or something like that, or at CMU, or any of the colleges along here. Find the right department. It could be social, it could be any of them. I don't even have departments across it. Find a couple of professors, engage it, and get these students in early. And they're putting their comments in and seeing as this whole process is being built. You have so many universities who this is what they're teaching and learning. So this is the time to have a 101 on Pittsburgh 2050 plan. Get students right in the mix of it, right?
I would
There
say,
is a course, it's,
Specific to this.
not specific to this plan, but there is a community workshop in the architecture.
But I'm saying this is the course.
Yeah, so I mean, I can give you information that Dr. Armstrong can talk to me. So, I'm not sure. It's usually a spring.
Okay.
I moved here from Ithaca. I went to grad school up there, and I know that Ithaca's comprehensive plan, they worked with like a specific grad school, like they did a workshop with the planning grad school, and then they were like heavily involved in it. So I think there is like a system for it and an opportunity for something like that. But we're not the decision makers, but what we can do with that.
The same thing, like we go to the museum, right? We can have an exhibit on community planning, and we have the hall of architecture up there. We bring this into there, we talk about it there. Right? You have community resources that want to engage in this process, but they just need to be invited or offered as to what they can do and play with, right? And so I think it's reaching out to each one of them and say, all right, what can we do with the hall of architecture? Great, we can pull out the plans from the old JPL and see what it did and how that affected planning in the past. But now we have an opportunity of looking forward in terms of what our businesses are going to be and how we need it. And great, we have exhibits going through, and there's a 7 o'clock lecture on a Thursday, and you guys come in and present, and we have other people debating or whatever it is, right? Is the 2050 plan a good idea for the city or not? You could mix it up in terms of a fun way of engaging the community, right?
For sure. We're definitely going to be talking about how we can connect with the museum, so definitely. Okay.
I think the idea is that those working groups would be that. So it might be a little too early in the process for them to be doing things like that, but for like groups like the government working group or like on the steering committee, there are like representatives from PIC and CMU that hopefully at like certain touch points would be like, this is when we can do something for the plan and like contribute and be a part of it. So I think that these different working groups that are like members of the community is supposed to be.
Yeah, I think we have a different track. It's more like a marketing track, right? This is more of a getting a message out as to the importance of the city functions. And it's a pitch out there for this. People get involved and say, oh, I really like that, I enjoyed that, or whatever it was. Now this is how you get involved, right?
And to have ownership over it too.
Right. But it's, I'm not trying to get them right into the work groups. I'm trying to get them to understand what you're trying to do. You know.
No, I'm not saying being part of the working group, I'm saying that was the purpose of the working group.
No, agree, but I'm saying I think what we're missing is just an information marketing track.
Yeah.
Right? Of going to each high school, right? And you have a dog and pony show that goes to each high school and does a presentation there and talks about it, and this is your future, and whatever that is, right? You're making me brainstorm off the top of my head here, but it's this idea that you go around and do presentations where people are already, you know.
That's a great point, and that's really, I think, something we are planning to do. We're trying to make a little engagement kit that we can empower others to share the good news of the comp plan. And I hope you all will, with your networks, with your clubs at university. We're very excited about the opportunities that this thing can lead to. I don't know, probably, I can't count the number of times at a community meeting we've reached a challenge point, an open loop where it was like, well, if we had a comp plan, if we were a little ahead of things, I think we'd be in a much better position. So it's the answer to, I think, a lot of our struggles, right, as a government, as a city. All that type of messaging are definitely ways we want to spread the good news and importance, because we want this plan to be grounded in the values of the people, and to embrace it as your plan. It's not city planning's plan. It's really our plan, so that it can have longevity, for decades. So I think it's probably a good place to wrap up, unless there's any final words from our.
Does anybody have any questions online? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want, or to drop something into the chat. We can read it aloud. Everybody's being very quiet, battened down against the weather. You guys have any questions?
I do think at public schools and policing, so there's different things that are government functions that we didn't really talk about that make, because you raised the question of what is equity, right? And in terms of, you put the question out, if some communities didn't benefit, or some members of the community didn't benefit when development happened, right? So let's go back and learn, why didn't they benefit from the development? What was wrong with that? And so how are we going to mitigate that in the future? So if I'm a renter, I don't have an opportunity when someone comes in and buys my house out to put a big building in. So I missed out on that. The person who owned the house had it there. So there's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But these are things we need to understand when we apply some of those general terms to say, oh, equity, what do you mean by that? What was not equitable, or how are we going to fix it in the future? Right? I think that's a challenge for you in terms of the way you talk about this.
For sure. And I think that's one thing that this exercise will allow us to do is, let's say we have that housing strategy. We're going to be able to our best of our ability, think through all of the consequences and the ripple effects that has. Definitely a good point.
How are you balancing the kind of the conservative with the progressive tension in the planning? Because Pittsburgh was a city that evolved without any specific plan, and with a population at one point or another almost twice what it has now. It's smaller, But there's a lot of talk in the way that you structure the plan here about like keeping what we love and conserving what we've got. And I'm wondering if there is any thought being given to, we could, certain things could be less dense, other things could be more dense. Development could be concentrated in certain areas with the idea of trying to deliver efficiency, walkability, food and walk sheds that make some sense, sustainable transportation networks and mobility connections, effective use of green space and natural resources, those kinds of things, that it's harder to do if what you're trying to do is to preserve the entire fabric of the city.
That's a great point. I think the response I would give is it's really that balance between community voice and data. So like some of the data is going to force us to maybe get out of our comfort zones and to think of change that might be uncomfortable. But we're going to like still try to honor some of that character that made Pittsburgh Pittsburgh. So that's kind of like, that's where the magic happens, right? Like how do you try to find a balance, try to blend those together? And that's why we have a great team, and it's the greatest challenge, but I think it's great opportunity.
I think the language change is going to happen, right? So people are afraid of change, but in reality, change is going to happen. This will help us think about what that change is going to be. There's nothing, we can't stop change from happening, right? And your whole life, that's the only constant is that there's going to be change, right? And so we're not going to go back to the 50s and play stickball in the streets here in Midland. It's not happening anymore, right? Something has changed, right? So how do we embrace change, think about the change in the future? It's going to affect us all, right? And if we don't, we're letting the winds of nature decide our course, right? By making no management plans, it's still a plan, right?
Yeah, great point. And that actually was, if we had time, that was going to be the final thought, was if you had to predict or recommend something that would be unexpected, a change for Oakland through Pittsburgh that you could see coming in the next 10 years. Then those are the things we want to start thinking about, right? So maybe I'll leave that as kind of something to take with you, is what would be something that maybe be unexpected, not the status quo, but maybe something that could be helpful. So maybe one final thought?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's not a huge thing, but is there, like, finding a way to look at past plans that exist today, or that don't really exist now, and seeing, like, we sometimes have ambitions, like, for Oakland, one of the big things is diversifying the population of people who live here, so it's not just students, and making more people come here. And it's like the market really pushes for it to just be, we're going to build 50 new student apartment buildings, and it's just student. Of like how we can maybe try to find solutions that aren't just saying, like, hey, this is a great idea. Maybe if we just build more housing, this would be something that maybe trying to work with institutional master planning or something along those lines of maybe having larger factories or larger groups that are able to levy some fund towards advancing goals beyond just trying to integrate them a little bit better.
That's a great point. I always think about like housing options. There's such a diversity that we probably lack and we're not thinking about. Like, thinking about different co-living configurations, thinking about co-ownership. There's just a lot of models that are kind of fringe, but maybe we could explore like how could we make those more, feasible, right? So, I think this is the time to be thinking through some of those options.
So co-living, we've got to fix the free per house.
Yeah.
We have, fundamentally, if you go back and say how many people were living in this community before, some of these houses here, you can walk along, had 6, 10 people living in them. Legally now you only have 3 that are not of the same family, right? So that co-living, which is a great idea, and we've had it for years, right? People used to have boarding houses, and people would come in here who were working for a couple of years and could live there, and people could profit off of that. Keep them in the house and repair it, not allowed.
Yeah. And so it all goes back down to like, how does that filter down to our policy, our zoning? And yeah, that's exactly what this plan will be getting at.
I also just learned about the SHARE program, which is like a co-living program, which seems like really awesome, and I feel like people don't know about it. So I'm taking an opportunity to plug the SHARE program. You guys should look it up. But it is like an opportunity for like co-living.
And they have 3 unrelated in-house.
Yeah, and what's cool about it is it actually connects the older adult population of the students. So there's this, I might get the model wrong, but there's an example for like an older aging adult that needs a little help with maintenance, could have like a student as, renting a portion of their.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. Let's figure it out. I think we could do it.
No, it exists. Like,
And-
it does.
But how is it legal, I guess is my question.
Yeah, and.
Well, it's run by so like you're matched up using like the agency on.
Agency on aging.
But is it just like one, this is just 2 people then?
No, you can have like multiple like students in there.
If you're living as a single household, then that functions in the same, there are different ways that the enforcement agencies regard that. And there is no means at this time by which people go from door to door and determine whether or not you are related. It's all very self-reported. The law is interesting. It's a vestige of trying to get rid of courthouses.
That's the rumor. I want to, no one has proven that yet to me. That'd be great if you could show me where that was from, but.
But the point being that, that there's now a measure before city council to try and change that law to be able to have a more expansive definition of household.
Yeah, these houses are designed for lots of people to live in them, Because they work. People live much more closely together in shared communities, and we just destroyed that, so.
What was the county, this program called?
It's called SHARE,
Share?
and it's through the area that you.
Agency on aging, area agency on aging, triple.
Okay. Is this a new program?
It's new to Pittsburgh, but it's new to Pittsburgh. So like it's usually in the rural communities, but it's in the urban community, and I think it originated from like LGBTQ communities.
There's a Scandinavian model for dealing with aging communities.
It's a good thing you brought that up because I could help connect this with someone to share more about.
Yeah, we're getting like very. This is what we
That's actually something that we can do. So let's try to connect them.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you all. I appreciate the discussion. I think we covered a lot of good things. Yeah, please share the news. Tell all your friends. It's important stuff. So thank you.
You're gonna get the nonprofits involved, foundations and things like that in this? Because there should be like another track, which should be the economic development side of this, right? There's one thing for you guys to pay for the road, there's another thing to figure out how to have the economic engine support what you're doing at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there are a number of representatives from those groups on steering committee. Yeah, they're kind of pushing that.